Thank you, Sirish. Thank you, the Indian Summer Festival, and of course, the wonderful uh, 5 by 15 platform for bringing us all together. Um, in a sense, I was sort of gearing up to speak about photography as a kind of language, and a language that also speaks to power. And I'm delighted that the two people who've gone ahead of me have already kind of plowed up the earth for us. Um, Thank you, Suresh, for just reminding us that, at this time of the COVID pandemic, when all of us are so overwrought with the kind of silence and the isolation of the past 3 months. And I think it's important to remind everybody that for people in Kashmir, this lockdown in its present form is now at least 10 months old, and that it began on the 5th of August of 2019, when a very long-standing legal and constitutional relationship between India and the people of Jammu and Kashmir was abrogated without explanation, without process, without procedure. And the most terrible communications lockdown was kind of imposed. And I think it bears mention that in these 10 months, for the first month and a half, there was no telephone, there was no mobile phones, no landlines. For at least more than 5 months, as Sirish pointed out, people had no access to the internet, which he rightly points out is the longest internet shutdown in a democratic country. And even today, 10 months down the line, what we have is a incredible choking down of the internet to 2G speeds, as they're called. So, for example, this conversation cannot take place with anybody in Kashmir. And this chokehold has, in a sense, when Ben Okri was speaking about I can't breathe, then there are various kinds of chokeholds that can be imposed on a people. And so in the time of the pandemic, for example, doctors cannot access important PDFs that they need to look at medical protocols. Students can't access their materials. Conversations can't take place in the way that have helped the world to survive. So it's just important to remember that. One other little something to do with language, which I want to place before you. The book is called Witness, and it's up on the screen here. Um, the word in Urdu for witness, the word Shaheed, um, is a word that often carries two meanings. There is the meaning of witness, but there is also the meaning of martyr. So the act of witnessing would say in Urdu be called shahadat, but shahadat is also martyrdom. So there is this delightful ambiguity in between these two words. And it's not just in Urdu, it's also in Persian, which is a language and a culture which deeply inflects Kashmir, and even in Arabic. So for example, even in the Quran, you have this.
Sanjay, we seem to have, there we go.
Oh, I'm back.
Sorry, we just.
Yeah, so some gremlin in the system. So I just wanted to place this kind of this duality between the act of witnessing and the act of martyrdom as being the kind of space that the book tries to travel through. So this is the book Witness, and physically it's I'm trying to move it ahead. Yeah, so it looks like that. It's like an archival folder, although much of the material is very contemporary. I'm going to show you just a few images from each of the photographers. I'll begin with Merajuddin. So he has I'm going to show you 4 images by Merajuddin. The first is this, and it's called Baker's Assistant at a Security Check, Srinagar, 1992. This one is the assassination of a judge, Nilkant Ganju, Srinagar 1989, and crackdown by army soldiers, Srinagar 1993, and finally, what's called Aftermath of a Siege, which followed the destruction of the much revered Sufi shrine of Char Sharif in 1989. But the other photographers, they carved their own language for themselves. And so, for example, with Javed Shah, who was a photographer with the Indian Express, this image called After a Fidain Attack. And again, his image, Militant Killed in Attack, Srinagar 2004. I just want to remind you that these were newspaper photographs, and it says something about a certain time when newspapers would be able to carry such difficult images. The third photographer is someone who already has been alluded to, Dar Yassin. His work with the AP team in Kashmir got him the Pulitzer this year. This one is called Police Take Cover, Srinagar 2015. And this image called Funeral of a Militant, Pehlipura 2016. Javed Dar, who follows, is also an extraordinary photojournalist, but many of his most interesting pictures for me come out of the margins of his photojournalistic work. It's sometimes what he sees on the way or from news assignments, and sometimes in the aftermath, such as this picture, which is called After the Fire, Frislan 2016. Altaf Qadri, another very exceptional photojournalist with a deeply, deeply humane eye. This image called Aftermath of a Grenade Attack, Srinagar 2006. And this very moving picture called Grave of a Militant Commander, Avalura 2008. Also in the book is Shumit Dayal, a very, very skilled photographer. His work in Kashmir is mostly on film and on black and white. And much of it is actually an excavation of his own family's albums, which he then mixes with what he shoots. So this image, for example, is a composite of an image he has shot with, in this case, not the front image of a photograph from a family album, but the back of his grandfather's, a photograph taken by his grandfather. We move on to Shaukat Nanda, who lives in the North Kashmir town of Baramulla. Shaukat, this called Saqib on the Run, this image from Baramulla 2014. It's part of a set of 10 or 12 images that he has taken about these young men who can't stay at home during the day because the police are looking for them. So they inhabit, abandoned buildings, and in this case, a graveyard on the outskirts of the city. Or this sort of photojournalistic image, but extraordinary in its own ways, called Protester with Slingshot, Srinagar 2010. Syed Shahryar is a very, very young photographer. This extraordinary photograph called Funeral of a Militant, Tral 2016. And then this very quirky image called Police Announcement, Srinagar 2016. And finally, I began with the work of Merajuddin, who was touching 60 when the book came out, and the book ends with the work of Azan Shah, who was not even 20 when the book came out 2 years ago. And Azan sees himself as a photographer of the city, shoots both in color and black and white. This image of the Fateh Kadal Bridge in Srinagar 2015, and then this one called Friday Protest, Srinagar 2015. So that's the book, Witness. And I just wanted to say that all 9 photographers in this book, as you would have gathered, men, but in the 2 years since the book came out, we now have some remarkable young women emerging, photojournalists, some of them, and photographers. And so in a sense, that search for a language through photography it seems to every year we see more and more people coming into the field, and it's becoming they've sort of laid claim to photography as a kind of valid intervention. And my time is nearly up, but I just want to leave one last idea with you, which is that the scholar, and she writes on photography, Ariella Azule, talks about the civic contract of photography, and specifically alludes to this situation in which the photographer, the subject, and the audience are tied in a kind of pact, which speaks to the outside world, but also speaks to itself. And I find that absolutely fascinating, that in a place which had no tradition of photography before the conflict exploded 30 years ago, has, without any assistance, there are no photography schools, has kind of found itself in a place where now photography has become a language that Kashmiris claim for themselves. So thank you very much.